When application completion rates drop, something is off. Students aren't getting the support they need, and that's affecting your numbers. Enter Element 451's AI assistants. They step in where students struggle, offering real-time answers and advice, guiding them through every step. Learn how AI assistants can boost your enrollment outcomes. Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
I think a big focus right now is really surrounding predictive analytics and how you can apply AI in everything you're doing. And again, that comes down really to fundamentally having good, complete data. And oftentimes, I think a lot of institutions are empowered to kind of pursue these next steps, but don't necessarily have the foundation of their data in the right place in order to accomplish that.
Welcome to the EDDY podcast. A podcast that serves as your weekly guide to the data driving higher education. We are your hosts. I'm Jamie Boggs.
And I'm Timothy Davis. Join us every Friday for weekly breakdowns of the most important data, trends, and topics in higher education.
The EDDY podcast is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below.
Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
Hello and welcome to the EDDY podcast. I'm Jamie here with Timothy, but it's not just us. Timothy, we've got a guest today.
Today we are joined by Katie Tomlinson, who is the Senior Director of Analytics and Business Intelligence at Education Dynamics. Hey, Katie.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've had a few folks from Education Dynamics now, and it's been great to meet more folks around your company. And so we're excited to talk to you and about what you do. Before this recording, we were zeroed in on the idea of like data management as our topic for today. So do you want to go ahead and give us a little intro to what we mean when we're talking about data management?
So data management really refers to the process of organizing, storing, protecting, maintaining, and retrieving your data all throughout its life cycle. This is going to encompass everything from your data collection to data cleaning, analysis, visualization, and then storage and security. And really your effective data management is going to be crucial for institutions because it really allows you to collect and analyze information, both about current and prospective students, can help provide insights into things like behaviors and preferences. And you can study everything from awareness all through the student life cycle, hopefully leading to retention. And as higher education becomes more increasingly data-driven, really that ability to manage and leverage your data is essential to drive those outcomes and to achieve your institutional goals.
As we continue to find new ways to gather and put together data, I think it's even more important to have that holistic approach to data management on campus. But once you've got your data in order, what are some best practices for pulling the right things out to make sure you're utilizing your data in the best way?
Well, first of all, you want to make sure that you have a good data selection process. So you really want to think about defining the objective of what you're trying to accomplish and what data is going to be really relevant to meet that objective. We also want to think about identifying relevant sources for that data. So some of that's going to be internal, it could also be external, but really want to think about what's going to inform your analysis. So if you think about things like maybe you're interested in a campus location, what would benefit you, like to append something like a DMA to your zip code, or maybe you want to identify latitude and longitude to maybe understand that difference between an inquiry and maybe where your ground campus is. So you want to think about how all of your sources really fit into that big picture, how frequently they're going to be refreshed, what considerations you need to have about them, and then are they going to be really reliable and durable for the future? And then it's also really critical to think about things like data quality. So just ensuring that it's going to be really accurate. You want to make sure you have complete data so that you're avoiding some of those flawed insights. the last thing you really want to do is have some bad data for strategic decisions. So you need to think about people having checks and balances of what you're ingesting, ensuring that everyone involved with that data understands the difference between good and bad, with the ultimate goal of it really being perfect. And then the other thing I would say is you really need to think about documentation of process. So keeping track of how data was selected can really help enhance your transparency and how you can reproduce it. I often find, sometimes even at our own organization, that this step is really most often sacrificed as a result of time. But I can't stress enough how important it is. And if you aren't in a state of data documentation right now, just start with any new sources that you're onboarding and then grow your process with your legacy sources from there.
We have seen the exact same problem at Element 451 and on various campuses that we work with. Processes just live up in people's heads, descriptions of what data means and how it's collected and how it's being used only exist in the mind of the person behind the keyboard. And the more you can do to get that out of your head and into a document or into a graph, like maybe an entity relationship diagram for our database nerds out there, those can be really, really powerful. But the one that I actually want to dig into from that list is the first one, which is defining your objective. I mean, you work with clients, of course, you work with EDDY. You've seen this industry, for a long time. What are some of the most interesting new objectives that folks are working towards as they try to leverage their data?
I think a big focus right now is really surrounding predictive analytics and how you can, apply AI in everything you're doing. And again, that comes down really to fundamentally having good, complete data. And oftentimes, I think a lot of institutions are empowered to kind of pursue these next steps, but don't necessarily have the foundation of their data in the right place in order to accomplish that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like putting data together in a central database is a struggle for some folks. Like they're still pulling CSV files or Excel sheets and storing them on a local desktop or like a shared network drive. So yeah.
Yes.
You were going to say something, J-Bo?
Yeah, you mentioned just getting data from all the various sources, and that can be messy, and it's ever changing. You mentioned AI with figuring out how to manage data and that kind of thing, but it also, how are we gathering data in 2024 in higher ed? Is it all through RFI forms online now? Are we tracking web page views? Like what all are we using to gather data to make these decisions?
Yeah, there's a variety of data collection methods. Some of them are going to be manual and some of them are going to be more automated. So if you think about those manual methods, some of them are the RFI, you've got people filling out forms. You also have maybe some primary sources where you're conducting interviews. So you think about things like qualitative data, where more of that automated method is going to use more software or technology. So you think about things like web crawlers or web scraping, or even tools to build in your pipelines like Supermetrics or Rivery can really help streamline those pipelines and the data acquisition process there.
You mentioned a couple of softwares in there. What were those two, and like what do they accomplish?
Well, so we focus a lot of our efforts on the marketing side of things. So Supermetrics and Rivery are great places for you to source the connection. So if you want to get Google Ads or LinkedIn or GA4 or any of those kind of sources, you're going to find hundreds of dimensions and measures that are associated with those that you can easily pull in, as opposed to having to use a direct API where you're constantly maybe having to manage some of that change of documentation or definition or all of those types of things.
Right. I've used Supermetrics before, or at least kind of been around it. It's basically like it's its own website. You go there, you can get your own account, and it's basically going to take data from one place and put it somewhere else, usually data from your website, and put it in an ad platform or in a maybe some other sort of database, whatever it has connections and supports for. I believe it's paid, or but there is like some sort of free version. Sometimes they have like community templates that you can plug into like Google Tag Manager, but those are the softwares that are kind of in play, at least that I've seen. Is that kind of your experience too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then let's talk about like the systemic approach that institutions follow to ensure accuracy in their data collection efforts. And while you're talking about that, would you also speak a little bit about like the people at the table? Who are the decision makers? What are their roles? What departments may they be coming from? And how can campuses sort of work across divisions and really across silos to make this happen?
So I would say that the first thing is making sure you do have an owner of each data source, and establishing who that is. Maybe they're in charge of the definitions, they're in charge of understanding what dimensions and metrics, and then helping make sure that they're providing good documentation towards all of those things.
Do we see that these are typically, kind of the grassroots people with their hands dirty, or is this typically coming kind of top down? What situations and where have you seen campuses be successful when they endeavor into, what is effectively like the next generation of data analysis beyond, just kind of collecting it?
Sure. So I've kind of seen a mix of both. I would say where we see the most success is where we have the fewest decision makers. When we have kind of too many cooks in the kitchen, maybe we're defining what type of analysis we want, or what hypothesis we have about the data. All of a sudden, it can become really messy in understanding what the objective of what we're trying to accomplish is, and then ultimately getting that sign off from a decision maker to say, yes, it met those objectives. So I would say keep it as small as possible, and empower those people to really make the decisions about what is going on and going into that analysis. The other thing I would say is sometimes when you have people at too high of a level, they're not in the weeds and they don't really understand all of the inner workings of what you're trying to accomplish or what challenges you might experience. So I think that there's a good mix between having that strategic element and then maybe having some of the doers involved in some of those decisions to have a good meeting of the middle, and a good cross section of representation across stakeholders.
Yeah, so basically people that understand what the larger institutional goals are and the people that
Correct.
can realize those goals for sure. But
Correct.
yeah,
Yes.
I don't think anybody in the history of higher ed has ever accused an institution of having too many decision makers. So this is a hot take for this episode. You definitely heard it here first. I have one more question on this before we kind of
Sure.
keep advancing through our topics. For the folks that you talked about, like data source owners, right? The people who are going to be in charge of, maybe it's the SIS or the CRM. What do you
Mhm.
typically see as like the skill sets for those folks? Like, are these folks that are mainly like front end users, so they're using websites or they're using applications that they load up on their local computer, or these folks have a little bit more like computer science or development experience? Like, do they need to be able to write SQL or read a JSON packet from Supermetrics or something like that? So what is your experience of people being successful there?
Honestly, it's going to be the latter. So typically, I do see that technical aptitude is critical. I think that typically, if you have a computer science background, a math, a data science, something about where you think about kind of data in a unique way, and you are interested in making sure it's complete and it's quality and that it checks, and you can do the gut check on all of it as well. That's where you're going to have the greatest value and who's contributing to that. I see the most problems when we work with institutions who have somebody who kind of does it on the side. And I think there's a lot of those types of scenarios. So, any chance we get to get our technical team involved and help through the implementation of anything, I think is really advantageous to make sure you're partnering with maybe somebody who does have more of that technical aptitude. But then you have the person representing, understanding kind of what's available there.
Jamie and I have talked about that same idea several times, is like, and so many campuses are stuck with hiring situations and staffing situations
Absolutely.
where these become, secondary concerns of somebody's primary position. And, I mean, one of the things that we've recommended before is like, hey, if you've got a computer science program on campus, maybe you're a 4-year and you got like a math and science program, or if you got like partnerships or certificate programs that you can tap your employees into, definitely make those opportunities available to your staff. I mean, they don't have to go out and get a full 4-year degree, but like understanding computer networking, understanding database design, that can go a long way in making someone more prepared to have these more technical conversations.
So we've got the right people in the right seats. We've got our decision makers. We've got our technical expert here with us, and we have a pile of data. How are we going to go about getting that ready for proper analysis and to get actual meaning out of all these fields that are just rows upon rows upon rows?
Yeah, so typically we refer to that as our kind of data pre-processing or a data wrangling stage. It really involves a series of steps that help ensure that that data is clean, it's structured, and it's really suitable for your analysis. Typically, those steps may vary slightly depending on the nature of the data and the type of analysis that we're going to perform. But typically, it does involve some sort of data cleaning, which I'll tell you is probably my least favorite stage of the process. But this is things like removing your duplicates or correcting errors or making sure what you're bringing in is complete and knowing how to handle missing values. Do you drop those? Do you impute those? Kind of what that looks like. The data transformation stage, and this is where you're really converting that data into a usable format. So this could be things like normalizing your dimensions, cleaning up vendor names, even parsing out bits of data from an existing field, like maybe the domain name from an email. This could also involve some feature engineering, which would be like things like creating age from a birth date. And then you talk about your data integration. So are you combining data from multiple sources? Does this look like a data model? So maybe you're combining things in, Excel Power Pivot, or you're using, a software like Tableau to do this. Perhaps you're joining tables just in your catalog if you already have some strong data management in place. But then you're looking at things like data reduction. And that is really about kind of simplifying those data sets and selecting the relevant variables that you need for your analysis. And you really want to remove those fields that you don't need. And you want to ensure that the ones that you're providing have really strong value to your analysis. And then the last part is really about data formatting. And that's really standardizing and normalizing some of that data. That's going to help you in terms of that error detection, data cleaning, and really setting that stage for reliable data analytics. And it helps really kind of support some of those diverse data types and can encompass things like structured and unstructured data coming in.
What are folks on campus that are doing this kind of work? What are they typically using? In some situations, maybe you can get away with Excel, but as we get into more, technical work, what's the kind of technology stack underneath this that is powering this workflow?
Yeah, we see everything. We do see a lot of Excel. We see a lot of statistical packages like SPSS or SAS, programming languages like R or Python, and even using some of the visualization software. So if you talk about Tableau or Power BI or Looker Studio even. And I would say that the choice of those tools really depends on the specific data needs in terms of your analysis and the scale of the project, and then the resources you have available, as well as the type of data you're analyzing. So I would always ask as you're, starting an analysis, is this something you're going to do again? And if so, spending that time to kind of set it up correctly, documenting process, and taking the extra time with the data structure will really help pay dividends in the future for that to be a repeatable thing that you can use.
Katie, it's really important to have all of your data in one place, and it's really important to make good decisions. And I think a lot of times on campuses, we're looking for data to justify our decisions instead of driving our decisions. So when focusing specifically on marketing, how can we use accurate, clean, appropriate data to enhance our marketing strategies and help drive those decisions?
Yeah, it comes down fundamentally to making sure you understand your KPIs, understand your secondary KPIs, and understand the drivers of those things. And with good data management, you have a good pipeline of all of those things coming in. So you can effectively manage campaigns, you can fuel your marketing automation, you can understand and develop segmentation and target personas, and then you can leverage all of that within individual vendors or platforms in order to fuel some of the new and emerging AI that's kind kind of evolving within these tools as well. So the more robust data you have along your entire pipeline and the more you know about your audience, the better off you're going to be to kind of serve some of those tools and develop efficiencies and performance optimization there.
Well, there was the buzzword AI.
I know.
So let's yeah, can't get away from it. You can't get away from it these days. But it absolutely has some really powerful potential and even real use cases for marketing and analytics right now. So can you talk to us a little bit about how AI tools, especially like LLMs like ChatGPT, are changing the landscape and helping address some of the problems that we covered earlier and opening up new opportunities?
Yeah, I really think that AI is set to revolutionize some of our reporting and our analytics in pretty significant ways. Some of that will be through some of that automation of data analysis and report generation. Also thinking about AI can quickly process vast amounts of data and really help you identify some of those trends and generate more insights much more efficiently than some of those manual processes. And that will really help institutions really focus on more of that strategic decision making rather than being bogged down by data gathering or some of that descriptive analytics that go on. But I don't think it's going to be the end all be all to everything, just like everything else. So we're dipping our toe in the water of evolving our reporting to really think about AI being a complement to what already exists. So if you think about, evaluating marketing performance and those primary, secondary KPIs, and then the drivers, we want to make sure that we continue to supply, the dashboards and all of the transparency of that data to begin with. But then we pair AI with that to allow people to drive into deeper insights, to, ask the questions as to why has this happened? Or, what changes did we make last week that could have impacted our conversion rate? At this point, I don't feel like most of the AI has enough guardrails in place for it to be widely adopted across organizations. So the more we start to think about how do we build kind of the infrastructure and the guardrails and all of the things to make sure that if someone does come in and ask a question that they're not going to get the wrong answer or a bad trend or that's leveraged in a strategic decision, the better off we'll be. So it will be a huge focus for us in the next year to just build that in before we start to kind of release that as a complement to our reporting.
Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we have one more question before we wrap up, but I did want to inject there as you were talking about AI. One of the things that I was thinking about per our earlier conversation was documentation. Oh my gosh, ChatGPT literally just writes. It just writes, you guys.
I love it.
Like if you have a description of your SQL table and you're like, man, I wish someone would document this for me. I don't want to do it. Who could we turn to in these trying times?
A robot.
I agree, and they do a better job than I do as well. So
they do, yeah. They do a job that nobody else wants to do, frankly.
Correct.
Yeah, getting people to write stuff down. Yeah, just have a little chit chat with ChatGPT, and all of a sudden you got a little documentation. All right, bring us home, Jamie.
Looking forward, how do you envision AI making an impact in higher ed, data-driven decision making, whether it pertains to marketing or just how can we make sure you mentioned that the guardrails aren't there, but when they are, how can we be ready to make the most of this tool?
Yeah, I really think that AI has that potential to make a more data-centric culture within institutions. And so as our reporting becomes more efficient, our stakeholders can really engage with that data more meaningfully. And the democratization really fosters collaboration that maybe we never had and can really encourage some proactive analysis that can help you be used in the decision-making process.
It's almost like we planted some of your answers because you're certainly echoing a lot of things that we go over week in and week out. So glad to hear an industry leader supporting some of the ideas we throw around on this podcast.
That's great.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much, Katie, for joining us today. Where can everybody find you if they want to follow along with your work?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Katie Tomlinson at Education Dynamics.
Well, again, thanks so much. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Hope you have a good weekend, and we'll see you in the next one.
The EDDY podcast is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month. We've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional.
Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Artis Kadu, Dustin Ramsdale, Jeremy Tiers, and so many of your other favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.